But you still don't think you should change the slides? It's I'm not sure if the slide is really a nice one.
Wat zegt hij nou allemaal? Moet het in het Engels trouwens?
So yeah, thank you all for watching. I thought Reacticon was great. Hope to be back again in June 2021, or perhaps later. Thank you also, Willem, for your exciting news and your moment of glory. Yeah, we're a little bit curious why nobody's on Twitter mentioning your name, but yeah, it's disappointing maybe for you, right?
Yes, this whole thing is a deception.
Deceptions. So talking about deceptions, Magento. No, not Magento in general, but the Magento 2 front-end, right?
Yeah. Shall we talk about that? Is this the introduction?
I think so. So it's a moment of glory, a little bit chaotic. And actually, while we're going into your talk, I'm just opening up the beer myself, and I'm just really like celebrating, because this was the moment we're all waiting for, right?
I've been.
So enough waiting, not enough chit-chatting. Willem, take it away.
I will take it away. Short introduction, Willem Wichman. I work in a German agency, although I'm from the Netherlands, Internet. I've been doing that for 2 years, and before started 9 years ago, I think, with Magento. And as Jesse put in the announcement for Reacticon, I made a moment of fame with bundling JavaScript for Luma, wrote a blog post end of last year after doing a lot of research on how to properly use the advanced bundling for Magento. There was excellent talk from Magepack earlier this day. So let's not talk too much about what's in the past or the issues with Luma as a bundling or Luma as a front end and the bundling issues. We did months of research last year. There were multiple clients that we had where we improved page speeds. Some of them had actually a page speed score of 0, and we brought them back up to 80. So I wrote an optimization guide about that. And then, unfortunately, in March, there was a update from Google PageSpeed that literally dropped down those good page speed scores back to between 15 and 40. And well, it's become very, very hard to truly optimize the current Magento front end. And it basically boils down to Google not liking the fact that you're trying to put 4 megabytes of JavaScript into the browser of your visitor. And for that fact, 1 megabyte of CSS is also not helpful. And you can keep trying to polish Luma and spend a year trying to optimize it, but the amount of JavaScript that comes with it is just not helpful and not really fun to do. As Magepack, the Magepack presenter today said also, they spent more than a year working on a tool, and they must have been very disappointed too when in March everything basically got worse. Issues have been masked away pretty well in Luma with the demo data. They optimized it with critical CSS, so loading just a very small bit of JavaScript in the starting of the page and the rest loading in the bottom. But even then, when you run a Lighthouse score on on a default Magento front end, 38 is what you get. So that's not great. Magento's own Baylor tool has been abandoned. As I said, the Magepack talk earlier was highly recommended. It was very in-depth in how Luma handles JavaScript files and require.js, how it works, and how complicated it is to actually optimize that properly. So if you're planning to stay on Luma for now and you have a live website, do use their tool, since it's at this point the best tool that you can use to optimize Luma. If we talk about the alternative or the new front end that we are getting, or one might say we already have available, it's not that great either. There's 4 megabytes of resources that are shipped to your browser. And that's not only PWA Studio, that's basically all the PWA systems that are available right now. This whole PWA movement is just more and more and more of JavaScript. And the question is, do we really need that? I love React. I have nothing against Vue. I just made the choice to go in depth on React. Done a lot of work with it, built custom checkouts. So it's not that I'm anti JavaScript when the use case is good. But I don't feel the web should be an app by default. Every website should be an app. There's been such a great hype around PWA. Everyone and their mother has a blog with Gatsby.js or another PWA system that runs purely on JavaScript. And oh my God, it's so fast. But if you have a simple website, it's always going to be fast. And if you have a regular HTML page, that's got to be faster than loading in a whole bunch of JavaScript to create a really simple web page. So I'm not all for that. And there are some websites like Twitter and maybe Nike or Adidas or one of those bigger merchants. It might make sense for them to create a PWA or a web app. And some of them are actually really good, but most of them are not really good. And that's my personal opinion, and you're entitled to your own opinion. And if you think PWA is great, that's really great for you. And I'm not saying that I would ever build a PWA or a web shop on a PWA, but it should be the right use case. So e-commerce by default being a PWA, I'm not super enthusiastic about that. I'm passionate about the web, and I don't want to be an app developer simply. If I look at the complexity of a PWA, I can master that, I can build that, but it's not really what I want to do. I've done that 10 years ago using Flash apps, building complete websites as an app. And we all came back from that, and Steve Jobs killed that, and we got HTML5. And from there, web browsers evolved very fast and very good. And basic functionalities, or even advanced functionalities, are baked into your browser today. So you don't need a whole bunch of JavaScript just to do a form validation. So as I said, I don't feel currently that e-commerce should be PWA by default. Maybe on the higher segment, but a lot of Magento agencies operate in the mid-market. And I don't feel PWA really fits there by default again. I really recommend the document, the URL that I posted there. There's a lot of good thoughts on where we're moving with all this massive JavaScript powered websites. So Magento kind of let us down with Luma. They released it 5 years ago. They put a little bit of effort into critical CSS. They let Andrew Levine build Baylor, the JavaScript bundler that now has been abandoned. There was word more than a year ago that another team would take that over, and Andrew was taking off that, and another team internal at Magento would continue to work on Baylor. But right now, you don't. Baylor's been scrapped from documentation and not further developed. How I see it, we don't have a lot of alternatives for the middle market. It's super expensive to build a PWA right now, and I don't really think that the solutions are great by themselves. Even if you have the budget and the knowledge to build a PWA, what's mid-market going to do with that? So for the past 2 years, we've been kind of lost. And if I say we, I mean most of the agencies that I spoke around me and also the one where I'm working, we're kind of lost in what we're going to sell our customers. We love Magento. We hate Luma. We tried all the different flavors of PWA, and it's hard. It's not impossible, but we've run into so many roadblocks, and we kind of lost our appetite in building PWAs. We started a few projects, we finished a few projects, and we're not really happy with either the process or the result that we got. So is everything going to be PWA in 2 years? I don't know, and I don't know if I'm going to be part of that Magento. So what are we left with then? An ecosystem that's less and less enthusiastic about Magento. UI components require knockout, customer data. It's all just really complicated to grasp and to properly build a website with it. There's enough quotes in just this one thread. And you can see like Alan McGregor, a very well-known person in Magento ecosystem, who's been in and out of the ecosystem since Magento 2, who's saying here as well, there's so much fun outside of the Magento ecosystem. People are just starting to look around them and switch solutions. And I would hate to see all the agencies that operate in the middle market leave Magento. And then this also, as Ben Mark says here, is this still a website? It's like compiling code and inspecting a website through the browser, and you can't even read what it does, how it works. How is a junior developer going to learn from this? When we started developing everything like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, everything was very easy to learn. You just inspect the code of a browser and you see how something is built, and it inspires you, and you take something from that. And it's a learning process just looking at websites and how they work. And PWA technologies don't really make everything simpler. And I've watched the talks the past 3 days, and none of it looks really easy. And people are super happy that after all this time, they understand how the node processes on the server work. I don't want to get into that. And I don't feel that we're helping juniors and startups and freelancers and growing the ecosystem from the bottom up. Like we could start as a freelancer and grow into having our own agency and become better and better at it. And currently the entry level just gets higher and higher. And we're just going to have a few monolith companies that have 100, 200 developers under them that have the budget to teach how PWA works and all this complex tech stack. And it just gets worse and worse. Is this a website? yeah, look at the source code. There's 3 JavaScript files. Try to learn from that. So yeah, I started 2011 doing Magento development, and kind of what I just said, it was kind of easy to get started. It was frustrating. There was no documentation, but we learned and we managed and we grew, and it made a great ecosystem with a lot of people that love the product. But the trend that we've been seeing is that people are leaving because, for example, Shopware has the same feel of this excitement of a lower barrier entry level and a simpler tech stack. And seeing all the trends and hating Luma with passion and not being enthusiastic about PWA has made me wonder for the last 2 years, am I still going to be doing Magento in 1 or 2 years if everything has to become PWA? And as I said, it's no fun. And I've heard the quote before in the past 3 days, doing Magento front-end development is not a lot of fun today. So what should we do to make it better? Reduce complexity and ship less code to the browser. And also reduce complexity and ship less code. So where am I going? Beginning of the year, my wife asked for a simple web shop. And it honestly made me think, should I even use Magento for this? As someone who's been building Magento shops for almost 10 years, I didn't even know if I wanted to build it for, for my own wife. Or should we go with some of these fancy SaaS solutions? Well, of course, I'm using Magento, but it made me wonder if I have the choice to just do anything that I want and build something from scratch. Let's make it fun. So what can I do to actually make this a fun process and have an end result that I'm happy with and I like to work with and just have a good developer experience? So yeah, and how do I build something from scratch with a nice design, performance, and highly customizable? So what is actually nice about the current front end, and why do we hate it so much? Layout is great, blocks and view models are great, routing and cookies and private data, how everything from backend and front end binds together, that part is really great. What's not that great is the whole JavaScript part. UI components, I'm very happy that I'm that I'm never writing a UI component again or touching it. After today, you also have the choice not to do UI components anymore. The layout complexity, we're talking about the Christmas tree of layout graphs. If you look at the checkout, there's 50 layers of XML to just change one checkbox on the checkout. And the amount and complexity of the CSS, which makes it the only option that we have, is to ship a whole megabyte of CSS to the browser. So let's see, how can we make something great from this? And how good is the Magento front end if you strip everything and make it as slim as possible? So let's get rid of everything. So I got started and wrote a reset theme that basically doesn't inherit from any parent team. And instead of doing a block remove, just comment out everything. So do a base override of all the XML files and strip out everything that's a block. While keeping the containers, because the containers are an extension point from the backend. So if I add a widget in the backend, it hooks into a container in front end, and I want to keep these kind of functionalities, the coupling with the backend, I want to keep intact. So after doing this, I ended up with an empty page. So you can see just only an empty body tag. And all caches are disabled except for the config. And I have a page render of 330 milliseconds on a local environment without caching in developer mode. So I think if anyone could give you that load time, we wouldn't be complaining anymore. And this is including all the composer packages that Magento ships with by default. So also the criticized MSI bundle. So let's keep this as a reference. So we always know everything that's slower than 330 milliseconds means we've added something to the load time. But at least now we know that Magento frontend can be fast. And look at all the features that we already have. I've heard 1 hour talks this past 3 days about how you can have server-side rendering. Already have it. We have routing, we have a coupling with the backend, sessions, customer sections are being handled. We have extensibility, we have plugins, caching is handled. All your problems are already solved with this front end. Now let's see how we can actually build a template from scratch. And we have the choice to do whatever we want. So let's see how we can leverage all these great functionalities that the browser has by default and not load a JavaScript bundle to do basic form validation, as Sergi in this tweet is saying as well. It was fun to see him tweeting simultaneously while as I was building on his front end, that he also found out like browser compatibility or browser functionalities are pretty great today, even for Internet Explorer 11. So everything we need to support has a lot of functionalities built in that we're currently shipping 100, 200, 300 kilobyte libraries for. So let's rebuild a template from scratch and bring back all elements that we need for a full web shop. And with every element that we bring back, if we put in a footer, a slider, a product, what's the impact on performance? And how, if it has a great impact on performance, how can we do it differently so that it doesn't hurt performance? And let's keep everything simple. And so that's fun to work with and easy to learn. No third parties, no third-party libraries. So no jQuery, no extra validation, no knockout and everything. Let's try to keep it as simple as possible. That's us, developers. At least it's been me for the past at least year on Twitter, seeing everyone being so enthusiastic about the Laravel ecosystem. The talk this morning about the Laravel Alpine prototype to build a whole web shop with Laravel. I see all the value from the Magento framework and the front end integrated into Magento, because we have this great ecosystem of plugins and ready to use block extensions and payment providers and all these things that work great out of the box. We only have a pretty crap front end that's attached to it. So let's keep the possibility to use all these great plugins and only write better front end code for them. So we basically already have 80% of all functionalities. We just need to do this 20% in the front end to actually make it look nice and have interaction there. So particularly Tailwind CSS and Alpine.js are products that come from the Laravel ecosystem that are really great. Alpine.js is basically Vue, but without a virtual DOM. So it renders in your browser, uses all modern API functionalities that your browser has for virtual elements, rendering templates. Basically building components like you would in Vue, but then only using this 26 kilobyte library. And then Tailwind is a utility-based framework. Takes a bit of time to get used to how to really build a full design in the front end, but within a week you're flying and building prototypes super rapidly. I had zero experience with both of these systems, and within a week, no less, within 2 days, I had a prototype. This is back in June. I was talking with my colleague Fabian, announcing that I started a side project using Tailwind and Alpine.js, and 100% page speed score. Of course, there was not a lot in the page yet, but it was promising. I could easily build a template. There's a lot of stuff readily available to insert components to a page using Tailwind CSS. And interactiveness with Alpine.js is super simple. And this is 100 points page speed, even with loading the whole Tailwind library, which is more than 1 megabyte. And if you read the exchange with Fabian here, the CSS can become even as small as 20 kilobytes if you optimize it. And I had so much fun. For the first time in 5 years, I was inspired to build stuff and break out of chains of the Magento frontend. So this was the first day result. So I started from there. What do I need? What are the base functionalities that I need to get a functioning Magento web shop? Because we have all these JavaScripts in default Magento frontend. Surely it must be doing something. So I started to rebuild all the basic functionalities that you need to have your cart, interactiveness with the backend, view the customer section data, submitting forms with the form key, which you need JavaScript for. And here's a really simple example of how I tackled, for example, the most complicated thing about the Magento 2 frontend was customer section data, which even core developers from Magento obviously didn't fully grasp how it worked, because every update of Magento fixed an issue and introduced a new bug, because what was happening on the left broke something on the right. And it's been a pain to really build proper front ends with customer section data, because the way it works in Require.js also made your page load super slow. From interactivity point of view, so for your Google PageSpeed score. So here's a simple example. I'm not going into details on how this works within those functions, but simply said, I simplified the whole logic of how sections are being loaded from the backend and invalidated. I'm just putting in the whole section data if I don't have a valid version. Store it in local storage, and then just emit an event to the window object, which is this private content loaded. That's one event, and any other component on a page. Here you have a very simple example view component. It receives all the customer section data, and then I look, do I have card data? Do I have customer data? And I receive the properties from there, and I can build my component using that data. On the right, you see a vanilla JavaScript example. For example, if you want to use Google Tag Manager and you need customer section data for that, just listen to the event private content loaded, and you have your card and your customer data all there. So this is one of the key things to replace the Luma Require.js logic. It was so complicated, and it needed so many external JavaScript files just to get to the point to see what the first name of your customer is. This has simplified it very, very much. I just invalidate it after an hour, or if the backend cookie for this customer data changed, and then I pull in the full new customer data. So in July, I had a more or less working prototype, and a new project came in at Integer, and I asked them if I could pitch my work in progress if I could work on it for 2 or 3 days and the next week pitch how far I got, and if we could use my new front end for this actual implementation for this customer. So I worked on it. After the first day, I basically had the main design all worked into the front end. Lisa, my colleague who was supposed to build the front end, was actually already complaining that there was very little less left to do for her if I would work on it for another day. Yeah, you can see from my enthusiasm, there was only 2 lines of CSS. It's the way how Tailwind CSS works, because all the classes come from Tailwind, and you prototype elements in your page by using predefined classes. You're not writing a single line of CSS, and it's super easy to build all these layout components. I'm going to talk more about how all this works after this presentation in screencast, and I'm going to explain exactly how everything works, because I could talk until midnight, which is not working for everyone as reference, because for some of you it is morning or so. Anyway, I would be talking for too long. So this is the first prototype. You can see here the mobile version. It already had a card that slided in, a menu interactivity, and all these things still didn't hurt performance. These metrics can't get any better. Of course, not all functionalities were there yet, but this was very promising. And most importantly, I was having fun. I was having so much fun building this thing. So this project is almost done. I have a working prototype. We're rounding up that functionality. Unfortunately, it's a B2B shop, so it won't be publicly available. But I'll first show a short video, because I want to show some Lighthouse scores, which is possible. So that yeah, I'm trying to show the toolbar pop-up is not showing, but the Lighthouse score is coming up now, and this is a home page. Mind you that these pages are all not optimized for Google yet, meaning there's no advanced loading of images. So there's no CDN, there's no compression on the images, there's no WebP, so no modern image loading. So there's no varnish on the server. So there's still a lot to improve here. But this is a vanilla website built with very basic HTML, not too much JavaScript. It has all interactivity that we need, and it scores always over 90 points. And it's not even fully optimized yet. So of course, it's very easy to ruin this score if you need a chat box, or if you need 10 different Google Tag Manager scripts. Then this will get worse. We're not using web fonts there, which typically also cost 1 or 2 page speed points. But still, you have a base that's for some pages up to almost 100 on this project. And I mean, we don't need a 100 page speed score, but at least it's nice that you're not starting with 44 points like Luma, or was it even less? Yeah, I think it was less, but you have a starting point that's really good, and you have a system that's fun to work with. So let me pull up a live demo of this project. So let's start from Google again. Get the first. So you see there's no shifting in layout. Everything is already there. The UI is built in such a way that it doesn't depend on JavaScript to load the layout. So it's just HTML and CSS, and your page rendering is instant. And then we add some JavaScript to add interactive parts like toggling a menu or toggling search. But when we render the page, you see there's no layout shifts. And that's something that Google is very keen on since last March. So these are the three main metrics for Google that are becoming more and more important in your SEO, so in your ranking in Google. And well, it's a simple shop, which made it perfect for a first tryout, because I didn't have all these functionalities yet. So wishlist is not, compare is not necessary here. So there were a lot of functionalities that we didn't need, but we have all these interactive components like the slider widget, which is loaded with GraphQL. So that's one way to keep your page loading very fast. We're not pulling this product data from the initial page render. If I reload it, initially it's empty, and then JavaScript kicks in, pulls it in with GraphQL, and it pulls in the product data. So it's not old stack, it uses GraphQL, it's bloody fast. It uses the best of both worlds. In my local storage, I still have, well, if I go ahead and add a product, I will get my customer section data. And also nice to show, these prices here are customer dependent. So it's pulling these from the backend also through a custom GraphQL call. So for every change that I make here, there's a GraphQL call that's less than a second to load. Adding to the cart, super fast. It's added to the mini cart. If I remove this product, it's instant. Let me re-add something. And if I want to edit this product, it pulls back the data. Let's set it to 3. My category loads all product options. So that's something that's typically very slow on a Magento category page, to pull in product options for all products. And we still have a load time of 500 milliseconds, and this page wasn't cached. Let's pull in all products. It takes a bit longer, 2.3 seconds. Then we're loading the full catalog without using varnish. So this server hasn't been optimized. If you look at the Lighthouse score, we didn't do all the extra optimizations on the server. You could make this a lot better still. So this is running on a test server even. Interestingly, we do use some React stuff. We've built a React checkout here that also utilizes GraphQL for everything. So if I change quantities here, it uses GraphQL, pulls in my new cart, and all the cart data that comes in here is used to populate my cart items here. And this is immediately, because it's a B2B customer, they don't need shipping data, they don't need billing information, they don't need payment information, because everything's handled from their ERP. So they needed a super simple checkout that's all within one page. So this is custom built React. Here again, we have some custom GraphQL endpoints, and it's been said often before in the past 3 days, and also on Twitter in the past months. GraphQL is what makes the future, and all the everything that's great on the quick interactive parts here are powered by GraphQL, and the whole movement of PWA has brought us this great GraphQL interface that I really love to work with. So let's see, placing test order. Let me quickly show you, there's some validation here. It uses Formic. All the data in this checkout, all the form data is stored in context. My card data is stored in context. So that's a bit of more technical into how the React part works. It just pulls in a fresh version of the entire card on every change that we make. And that's thrown into the card context. And from there, my whole page is being re-rendered. So let me quickly log in. This is also fully functional. So we rebuilt the customer account area. Everything is custom written HTML and Tailwind CSS. My account data, changing password and everything. So let's see, my card is merged. I have extra product here. See how fast it is. If I remove stuff, it's on GraphQL. And then let's finally order something. Placed, and then I'm redirected, and there's still a placeholder. That's the whole UI. And it's pretty great. It feels super responsive. It's very nice to work with on mobile. This uses native select boxes on small screens. So on an iPhone or Android device, you just have your native input for dropdowns. And then as soon as you go to a bigger screen, we have this fake dropdown so that we could fully style these. Validation here is handled on the hidden select element. So this is native validation. This field is required. And if you look on a mobile device, this is default browser validation. So no libraries. And if you look at the data that I'm pulling in here, I haven't touched that yet. This entire page is 260 kilobytes of resources compared to 8 megabytes on a typical PWA implementation. Pretty much the same for Luma, 4 megabytes, 8 megabytes, a lot. This is 0.26 megabytes for an entire interactive page that has everything. It has GraphQL, fetch, it has interactive elements, everything fancy, but it's a proper website. If you look at the source code, we didn't even minify HTML. We don't do compilation. You can learn from looking at the source code here. For me, this is what a website is. So we've been pretty enthusiastic at Internet, at my employer. Even more so, after working with it for a week, my colleagues were so enthusiastic that they started putting in more projects to build with this system. And currently we're building 5 web shops with it, including the one that's almost finished that you just saw. We've decided as an agency to use this as the default front end for Magento, because it takes days to build up a simple template. It's super much fun to build components. You just saw we do all this fancy stuff, custom add to cart on product listing pages. It's very fast. We can use GraphQL. Working with Alpine.js is just like working with Vue.js. So it's very familiar for those internally that already worked with Vue, and even if you didn't, it takes days to get the main grasp of what it does. So that brings me let me think about my order. What do I have here? Because we promised we're going to drop bombs. Yeah, let's go further. This is it. We are introducing.
Woohoo! Yeah!
Yeah!
Hyvä Themes. This
Awesome.
is a product. This is a product. It's real. It's still in progress. We're working on it. It's not fully featured, but it has most of the features that you need for a typical web shop now. It's a cooperation between me and IntegerNet. They are the main technical partner. They help me greatly accelerating the development of the product. All these things like building out the cart and different menu elements. And there's so much to talk about. The architecture that's behind it, the ideas that we have to build whole UI libraries so that you can easily pick from 3 or 4 different menus. Do you want a mega menu or a simple static menu or with a drop down? So this whole Tailwind CSS and Alpine.js ecosystem brings us capabilities to swap elements on your page. We've built it in a way so that they're isolated from each other. So the customer section data, for example, triggers an event from the footer, and that's just fed into a component like the mini cart. And a mini cart could be anywhere on the page. I could have 2 mini carts and it would still work. When I'm changing prices on a product page, there's an event with a price change, and anywhere where I'm displaying the price on the page, it receives the new price and it's updated automatically. So we have great ideas about building out this as an ecosystem of products with high extensibility and a whole library, different kind of teams. So a very simple team, a fashion team, a technology team, a minimal team for selling just 1 product or 10 products, all built on this base that is Hyvä Themes. And that explains the title of my talk, Keeping Ahead with Magento 2. For me and for the people that have been working with the system until now, everyone is bloody excited. It's so much fun to work with. It's like this quote that my colleague Lisa says, it's everything, all the small things like Alpine.js is super much fun to work with, and it uses GraphQL, which is modern, and just creating an interactive interface is super much fun, and it's highly performant, and we feel like we're crafting web pages again, and we're not stuck in debugging the, ugly words out of a backend that's driven by Node, and we have a payment method that doesn't work because there's 3 layers of middleware, and somewhere the API loses data from PayPal to the front end, and it takes 2 weeks to figure out where the data went. We're done with that. We're keeping the good parts of Magento, the parts that we love, that we are super experienced with, and we build on top of that with modern tools, things that we think that Luma could have become if it was constantly evolving, and Magento would have continued developing the Luma frontend. It could have been as great as this. So soon, multiple teams, library of interchangeable components. It's built for performance. With everything we do, we run a performance test. We check that it didn't influence the page speed score too much, but also just the loading speed and interactivity on mobile devices and everything. It's not going to be open source. It's going to be a commercial project. It's going to help you save weeks and weeks of development. We see run-through times of projects accelerating very fastly. We've had a project that was running for more than 6 months trying to implement the PWA. We almost finished it, and we were just not happy with it. No one wanted to keep working on it. No one wanted to support it after it would go live. So we're rebuilding that from scratch using Hyvä Themes. And we've been working on it for 3 weeks internally, and we've almost completely rebuilt everything that we did with PWA in more than 6 months. So a license will be €1,000. It will include a year of updates, so you will get all the new UI elements that we built, upgrades from Magento versions, so you keep up to date with security and everything. And after a year, you can decide if you want to prolong that. And there will be an extended license fee after a year that will be a lower amount, and we still have to figure everything out there. It's built with and backed by Intergenet, and it gives me so much confidence that an agency like Intergenet, which is globally so recognized for their technical level and their expertise in Magento, they fully jumped on this and they support it not only by word, but also building out the product. And they've given me incredibly much time and space to build out this product in the past 2-3 months. We'll have 4 live projects by the end of the year. It's become 5 even this week. Starting today, we accept early access at Hyvä.io. We'll slowly accept people. We can't handle a lot of signups right now because we're still building out the base product. So there's work to be done still. We're working on documentation. We have a Slack environment. The first partner has already came in, is starting to build out some features for us. They are super excited too. They've been working for it for just 1 week, and they also, the first thing they said, our jaws dropped when we presented it internally because it was so fast and we didn't even turn on the caches. We were amazed, and we're fighting internally who gets to work with this first. Probably all our projects are going to be with Hyvä Themes from here on. We'll announce more about that soon. So dropping Luma Knockout Require.js has implications. So we can use a lot of the plugins from the ecosystem that are great, but it's built on top of the crap Knockout and Require.js. So we're not going to pull that back in. We're not going to pull in jQuery because your block module uses that. If you want, you can go ahead and put it in yourself, but you're going to ruin everything great that we've built. So you'll have to rewrite the final 20% of your front end. And it's proven to be very simple to rewrite JavaScript that was written for Require and Knockout with this new technology. It's actually a lot of fun to do it. And we'll open source any compatibility module that we write. For example, we started on the Yirio Google Tag Manager plugin. It took me an hour to rewrite the JavaScript from that module into our front end, and we have a working plugin. And everything that we rewrite like that goes into the Hyvä Themes repository, and it's free for everyone to use when they have a license. If you're not super tech savvy and you can't write a React checkout, we've built in a compatibility module so that when you arrive in the checkout, it switches back to the Luma checkout. So your whole website will be fantastic except for checkout, but at least you'll have integrated shipping and payment. You don't have to worry about that before going live. We actually have 2 projects right now that we're developing that will go live with the Luma checkout, or maybe a one-step checkout, or anything that works with the Luma frontend, that just seamlessly switches to that theme. But ideally, you take your own checkout from, I don't know, Snowdog has a Vue checkout. There's more headless checkouts. As Shipper HQ has built a React checkout. Just bring your own, or take hours, because the checkout that you just saw on that first project that we're developing, that's almost done, we're open sourcing that. So that's going to become free. I'm going to release that during this talk, maybe after this talk. It's a work in progress. It doesn't have all the functionalities because we didn't need to build that yet, but before the end of the year, we're gonna need those functionalities ourselves too. So everything you just saw, that's pretty great. Working with GraphQL, just using two tokens, the car token and customer token for authentication. It works with Hyvä. You can plug it into your Luma checkout, Luma front end. It even works with PWA Studio. You only need to switch one config setting, and it pulls in your two tokens from Luma, from PWA Studio, and you have a fully working checkout. And there's so much to say about how we built the checkout. It's also built with components that are completely independent of each other. They only communicate with the main context on the highest level of the app. So you can pull apart a single form and just pull in the context from that form anywhere. Put the shipping and the billing and everything on one page to have a one-step checkout, or cut them apart into 3 different pages. So you have a multi-step checkout. The form validation just works if you click on submit order. It just requests the state of all the forms from the context. So it doesn't matter where your buttons are, where your forms are. It's fully customizable. You can have a look at that within the hour as soon as I click publish. And it's planned to be fully functional, well, fully featured, at least have all the basic functionalities that you would need for a checkout. We're open sourcing it also because we wanted to grow, get more payment methods from community. We have experience with writing payment methods, so there are a few that we'll implement ourselves. As you saw on the Beerhawk talk earlier today, implementing payment methods is the toughest part of a headless checkout. And the great advantage that we have is that we have this connectivity with the backend, and we can use the current module controllers and communication with the backend from the Luma teams. So that basically means that if you want to have a PayPal checkout, you set the data on the quote card, and you redirect to a controller, and the controller takes care of all the naughty stuff, all the nasty stuff, not naughty, but nasty, redirecting to PayPal, coming back, and your order is being handled. So one part of being headless is that you need to figure out all these logical things in communication with the backend, and by keeping that, we make everything so much simpler. Building a checkout becomes, or building a payment integration, a shipping integration, also just means that you need to do this final 20% of the front-end part, and you can keep the back-end part. So super enthusiastic about all of this. And we have a demo, of course. I'm again showing the Lighthouse scores through a pre-recorded video, because if I do it during streaming, live streaming, the Lighthouse scores being influenced. So you would see 80 score, and that's not nice. If you can also have 98. Let's have a look at the category page. That scores a 99 points, and that's without optimizing, without minifying HTML, without optimized browser headers. It does use varnish. Product page, 100 page speed score. And you can mess this up easily, as I said before. Load in one chat widget from your favorite help desk system, and they will throw in 6 megabytes of JavaScript, and it will pull down your score by 20. Or it doesn't use Google Fonts, so that will also hurt your score with maybe 2 to 3 points. Google Analytics will hurt it a bit unless you put it in all the way to the bottom of your page and load it async. And then live demo, you can navigate to this URL. It's running on a €5 VPS, and it's still pretty fast. Pretty fast, super fast, super fast. It almost feels like this PWA promise, because PWA is nothing but a promise that a website will be fast, which doesn't mean that it actually is fast. So let's see, even while live streaming 100, well, it's an empty page, of course. The homepage will do a little bit less, but I didn't show that video before for nothing, because this will be a bit less probably. See, 77, while in the video it was 100. Let's look at how this works on mobile. So we have this nice app-like menu and a mini card. Also, it's just like working with an app. I would almost add a manifest file, and you could call this a PWA. Sliders using GraphQL. There's a gallery, and also here you can see this is including all these images. So including the ones from the slider, we're at 700 kilobytes. Show me a PWA that uses 700 kilobytes for fully functional web capabilities doing all of this. Searching for a watch. So, and what's super hard to implement, of course. Let me see what I'm using here. No. You immediately see that everything works here. So, yeah, not a match. New account. So, hey, we even have a wish list. Customer account, my order data, of course, I don't have one yet. Let me just quickly show you the fallback to the Luma checkout that we have here. I hear the mic open up from Jesse, probably telling me that my time is up. Yeah, I don't even understand what you're saying. Is that Dutch? So you see here's a fallback to the Luma checkout. So you can bring your own checkout, do whatever you want here, or bring your Atlas checkout. The mini card here is fully rendered with GraphQL as well, and this is using Alpine.js. So you see, even with Alpine.js, with a library that's just 8 kilobytes gzip, 8 kilobytes empowers the entire website that you're looking at. 8 kilobytes of JavaScript. The rest is all browser APIs. Remove it, super fast. So we're keeping the good throughout everything that we didn't like, and we're using everything that we love. That's modern fetch and GraphQL. And I want to see a real website that uses it. I built this in 24 hours. That's why I'm kind of tired today. I built this fully web. Of course, it only has 2 products, but I fully built this theme over the last 24 hours. And you can go here, take a look, run a Lighthouse report. This also runs on a hosting server that's €5 per month. I'm live streaming, so this is a bit lower. You'll probably see somewhere 99 to 100 here. This site uses 2 Google fonts and runs Google Analytics. So it actually contains a few things that would hurt your performance, but I think anyone using Luma today would sell their soul for 82 Lighthouse performance. You know what? Okay, 93 on the homepage. Wrap it up with one final thing, PageSpeed Insights, because this one is usually less friendly than the Lighthouse score. Let's see what it does on a €5 VPS. $92. Not bad. So much more information coming up. We're going to blog about this. We're going to do screencasts. We're going to share a lot of knowledge about how we built this. I think there's already so much just to learn about how to build a modern website and how these tools work. So yeah, a lot more information coming up. I fully used up my 1 hour, but luckily Jesse promised me that we're gonna call this last hour the after party, and we can do a lot of talking about whatever you guys want to know.
Yeah, so amazing in one word. No, it's not one word, but one sentence. I think a lot of people are agreeing with the same thing online as well. So I think a lot of people were just always waiting for you to come up with like the real word, like a preacher saying that something.
Did I match up expectations?
I hope so.
Because I set expectations, and I was at one point I felt like now I have to make good for it.
Yeah, but so basically your talk started a little bit about being disappointed in Magento, but that's not the point of your talk, right? It's about thinking independently and just moving forward. And I think like during Reacticon the last couple of days, we've seen a lot of different things. And I'm not saying that you're completely right and that React sucks and Vue sucks and of course Angular sucks.
Say that.
No, but it's much more that actually every front-end developer has a choice to make, and maybe a lot of people have thought about that Magento is just enforcing something upon them instead of actually seeing the chances to improve things.
It's why Shopware is doing so well, and a lot of people are just not voicing out. They're not speaking up. They're not saying how they feel about it. They're just quietly leaving through the back door. Yeah. And it's not that I really like the guys from Shopware. They're super nice, also in person. And I also have nothing against them. It's just there's a deep passion for me for Magento. I love working with Magento. I think the backend is fantastic. I think most of the front end is fantastic. It's just we needed some modern stack on the current front end. And I just don't feel like building apps in the future. Maybe I've heard in 2 years the whole web will be PWA. I've heard it several times over the past 3 days, and that's really an isolated view. And
yeah, but to comment on that, Hyvä, and I'm mispronouncing it, but let's get back to that in a moment. But basically, you can add a manifest.json file, you can add service workers, and then it's a PWA, right? So
yeah. So my comment is not against PWA. The functionalities. I have nothing against bringing push notifications and adding it to your home screen and having an offline version. It's super easy to add it to this front end, and I will add a manifest file and have a service worker that caches my contact page and my home page and make sure that the section data is persisted even after an hour. Then you have a PWA.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need megabytes of JavaScript and a node server. And one thing I didn't touch on is not only the tech stack has evolved, also your infrastructure, the server that you need, and the knowledge to run Node apps is something completely different. And the price for hosting a web shop, especially now that Elasticsearch is required too, and your hosting costs are doubling if you're switching to PWA.
And why? Yeah.
And why?
Hey, and so one of the things. So I've seen a demo of yours already quite some time ago, I think like one of the first things I mentioned was why now? How come we're living in a Magento ecosystem, in a Magento community, and only 5 years after everybody is complaining about knockout and require and things are being too complicated and etc. Only 5 years later, somebody comes up, that guy is Willem, and he comes up with a golden solution. What is your take on that?
Well, browsers have evolved. Microsoft has evolved into a great company that was willing to kill all browser versions. I'm super looking forward to November next year when Internet Explorer 11 is being deprecated. Browser APIs are now at a point, and they have been for a while already, like this native template functionality that the browser has, so that you have an interactive DOM, a form validation, and all these things have been around for a while, but there wasn't one lightweight library that utilizes this properly. And Alpine.js is for me just as great as Tailwind CSS is a factor in the success for this. And if you would have tried this 2 years ago, you wouldn't have gotten away with just using browser APIs for fully functional.
Yeah, but then still,
because then you would have needed still jQuery and a lot of extra things. So there were real issues that Require.js and Knockouts tried to solve, and it for sure could have been done better. But I think everyone is just, the complexity of the Magento frontend is kind of scary. Not many people dare to really cut out everything and have an overview of how the backend ties together with the frontend. And because there's hundreds of JavaScript files, you initially have the idea that it's impossible to rewrite it because it's so complex. But in the end, it turned out after a day, after a week, I had my section data, form key for submitting data. So I had my basic functionality to add things to the cart, and that lasted just a week. And I was seriously sitting back and thinking like, okay, so now I have 30 lines of JavaScript, which replaces hundreds of JavaScript files. I must be missing something. But there wasn't.
Well, the nice thing about it is basically also that you're showing an approach of not over-engineering, but under-engineering.
Yeah, and build on top of that. So we have a baseline, a template that does the minimum amount of things, does it really well, really fast, and is so extensible that you can write your UI components using Alpine.js, or even build a Vue app or a React app that you load in page, and you will still have a fantastically fast website.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you load that asynchronously in a proper way, so you have optimum performance.
Well, and then on top of it, I love that quote as well, that by just introducing the technology that you prefer, you bring back the fun in Magento. And personally, I've played around with Tailwind and I disliked it, but well, as some people have mentioned already, nobody cares about my opinion. But my main point is there that we should be at liberty basically to introduce whatever front-end technology that we have out there that we prefer. And in your case, actually, you've proven that it's doable, and that actually the gain that you get is just so enormous. That the rest of us is just a bunch of idiots that we didn't come to that realization earlier. Hey, but
so many had it. So the first response from some of the people that I showed it early was we've thought about this many times. We've discussed it internally, but we just thought it was
Too much work.
Too big effort. We didn't think it was possible to do it in a feasible time and with a budget, a time budget that's realistic to build something. And yeah, well, it turned out it was quite an enterprise. It didn't happen overnight. I've been working crazily hard on this, but
yeah, but then that's why also you came up with a business strategy to make it reusable for agencies or developers as well. Hey, but before spending too much time in a monologue together with me, kind of, let's open up for Q&As as well. So there's a certain guy, and I'm reading this, Ben Marx. He's asking basically, how do you pronounce Hyvä?
Okay, it's Finnish
for Americans.
Yeah, so this comes from Finland, from Finnish. It is Finnish. I lived there for 4 years, and I have a very warm feeling towards the word hyvä, which means, upon many things, good, integer, wanted, desired. So it's basically good teams, and you pronounce it hyvä.
So Ben Marx, pay attention, hyvä. Same guy actually. Ben Marx is also asking whether you can write hyvä without the dots.
I allow that. The URLs without dots.
Cool. Another question from a certain Damien Retzinger. He's asking, what is PWA? Okay, let's move on to some other questions from more of the audience. Arjen, I don't know that guy. Arjen Miedema, weird name. Curious about how much time it will cost to keep it up to date with new versions like Magento 2.4.1 that just came out.
We're building it on, so these examples are on 2.4. I started developing on 2.3.5, upgrading to 2.4, introduced one view model and introduced the escaper instead of the escape on the block. And we're rewriting, or our to be announced partner is writing compatibility module for 2.3, which will basically add that view model and add the escaper to all blocks. So you have backward compatibility, and we can deprecate that module in some time. So we plan to upgrade with the newest version, and then try to move compatibility with older versions into compatibility modules. But we'll also document, so we'll update the modules, the themes ourselves, and we'll fully document what changed where. But there's a lot to be told about how you build the teams, because we completely killed team inheritance. We inherit from the reset team that we have. So the reset team basically just throws out all the XML except for the containers. And then every code that lives in your team is actually inside one team directory, which means that your XML structure is as flat as possible. It's as fast as possible, because there's no merging of XML, and there's no XML that's being unset in the layout and still living there while it's not being outputted. So you can just, when you start building a team, you basically clone it from the example team that we have, and you start throwing away everything that you don't like, and you lose all this weight that doesn't need to be loaded. And we compile the CSS from Tailwind. It has a super nice purge script that basically throws out all the classes that you didn't use on your website. So Tailwind by default is more than a megabyte. It has utility classes for any CSS thing that you can almost imagine. And as soon as you build a production CSS file, you purge out all the classes that you didn't use. So it's analyzing your theme directory, looking at all the HTML, all the classes that are used there, and abstracts those from Tailwind, applies your theming. So you have a configuration file where you define, so let me pull back this here. I've defined the container color for my header and for the background, and I have defined a style for a card, which is basically this block element with a shadow. There's just one configuration setting where I can set this to rounded corners and maybe a bigger shadow or a different background color. That all happens in a config file from Tailwind CSS. I recompile CSS and my styles are applied. So I have 20 variables that I can change, representing my website's main colors. So my primary colors, secondary colors, container colors for background and everything. I tweak that and I compile it, and basically your theme is styled to the design that you want. And it only uses, let me check how big the CSS is here, because here I actually included a form module from Tailwind and a text formatting module, so it's even heavier than it is by default. So this is a 99 page speed score, and I actually made this fancy with fonts and extra styling, and even more that the demo team uses at demo.hyvä.io. My CSS here is 16 kilobytes gzipped and 106 unzipped. And it includes all classes that you need. For example, I don't know, I didn't put up so most of the CMS pages are still missing here, but you can see, for example, here, all this content is styled with a typography class or extension for Tailwind. So it has a lot of classes that make CMS content look great on the front end.
So extending a little bit from this, do you foresee also that people could just remove Tailwind and theoretically even Alpine and just throw in their own CSS or JavaScript flavor?
That basically means that they're building their own front end, which is feasible. If you work really hard, you can do it in 4 months.
Cool.
No, all the base concepts here are really powered by Tailwind and Alpine.js. And if you look, for example, at what we've done here with these components that we've built here, both the styling uses Tailwind to build this interface This took 2 days to basically build this drop-down functionality, and there was some tweaking to get this pricing logic and everything hooked in. But without Alpine.js, without Tailwind CSS, you're basically back to an empty template again. So you have the same effort as I've had for the past months.
Well, except for that of course, the whole research of what kind of elements, what kind of HTML needs to be there to kind of have a basic functioning is there. Mm-hmm. And you've paved the way theoretically for more. Hey, but let's move on to some other questions. John?
Yeah, give me some clever questions.
Yeah, I hope so. John is asking whether the page structure is still managed through the XML layout.
What is still managed?
The XML layout. Oh, sorry, the page structure.
Yeah.
However, you mentioned the reset, right? So does that also mean that third-party extensions can still add in their own XML layout without?
Yeah, but it's not formatted in the front end. So you need to. So what you basically do, you install a third-party module and you'll see some unstyled content in your front end, because I kept all the containers. So if you have a blog module that puts a slider with blog posts on your homepage, you will see that block on your homepage, but it's unstyled and the JavaScript doesn't work, which is great because if it would work, it means you've loaded in 4 megabytes of libraries. So what you do then is copy the PHTML files from that module to your own theme. and then throw out all the classes from the default implementation, copy the JavaScript into a native implementation or an Alpine.js implementation. And really, if you've worked with this front end for a week, you're flying through these functionalities. As I mentioned, I've been rewriting your GTM module, Jesse, and it took me an hour to basically rewrite the JavaScript function. I can show that. Well,
yeah,
something
that's
for
okay.
later. Yeah.
It's a simple extension anyway. Nobody bothers with it. So another question is, it's actually
just if I can summarize, you keep the power of the backend, you keep the power of the XML capabilities.
Yeah,
the XML layout, which is all great. You just need to do that final 20% in the front end to rewrite the JavaScript, which is basically reforming some stuff and porting it over. And we'll have screencasts about that. We'll have examples about that in the docs. So we're taking care of that.
Yeah, and basically it's also that CSS part and that JavaScript part that should be done anyway if you're a really good front-end developer. And maybe if you're half as good,
if you're willing to do a PWA, you have to build everything from scratch, and you don't have everything from the backend that you can already put in. If you want to integrate a payment method with PWA, you're on your own. You have to rebuild it from scratch or wait until a third party develops it. For the Luma frontend, for the current frontend, everything is already there. All the big payment extensions already have a module that works with this frontend. You just need to do the presentation layer.
Yeah, so maybe one question that is now actually asked by two people. If there's a reset of the complete theme, does that also mean that parent and child theming is gone?
It still works. Well, you can. So I advise to copy the default module and make a clone of that and make it your own, because then you can throw out everything that you don't need and your CSS becomes smaller, you have less XML, and you become the owner of that code base. If you build an inheritance, it means that for the Tailwind CSS, which you're trying to optimize, you're taking the CSS classes from your own team and from the parent team. And that's bound to be a bigger CSS. I mean, we're talking about 16 kilobytes right now, so it will be 30 kilobytes maybe. So that's up to you, but it's not what I would advise by default. But if you have a multilingual, multi-site setup and you build your own default theme and you want to have different sources of that, different styling, I would advise you to write your own base theme and then create child themes of that base theme.
Maybe following from that as well a little bit is, you just mentioned multi-site, multilingual, and there's a question from Peter, how different will a deployment flow be, or will be mainly the same thing? And why would you say it's faster?
Because there's not so much files that need to be copied to your pod folder. There's no compilation, there's no minification, there's no bundling, you compile your CSS file with npm. So Tailwind has a utility, npm build, and it runs some optimization. You have one CSS file that goes into your deployment, and except for that, it's just become much faster to run a setup deploy.
Yeah.
So it works the same. You have a version CSS file in well, I can show you here. It still is static with a version that's tied to the deployment that you did, and from there it pulls in your one CSS file. And that's all these files here that includes analytics, these are all the files that you need.
Yeah. So maybe I see a question popping up. Do you still need or use MageSpec? And the answer is no, because there's no bundling needed. How easy is it to replace Tailwind with something else? So it's kind of like the question I asked earlier. Would you see
Okay,
a
so
future for that? But how easy is it?
Replacing just Tailwind. You'd be replacing all the classes. So basically, every element. Here, for example, a page title is just so that you know it's more identifier, but a non-unique one.
Semantical.
Yeah, so this is what Tailwind creates. Well, what asks the styling from Tailwind. So I have a color, gray, and a dark shade. The text is 3 times large. It's a title font that has something tied to that. You can see here, for example, I have a margin vertical of 4. And I probably have this one in my style sheet too. So now it's, okay, so it's not there.
But this is, of course, like a Tailwind demo. But back to the question, I think like the point is you can replace the CSS. But you
you can replace it, but you need to replace all the classes, or you need to write your class. You can keep in these classes, but you would need to write your own CSS style sheets. But honestly, people were skeptic well, the people that have worked with it too. They got used to SAS and less and their way of structuring CSS, and you see it. If you keep an eye on Twitter and read a bit about Tailwind CSS, everyone that works with it starts with, I was skeptic at first, but I got started, and within 2 hours, I was hooked.
Yeah, but
it's been so much fun to work with it.
Yeah, but that's what a community always does, of course. But the guy asking that question is actually Sean. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Willem. I'm asking this question more in something like a components utility framework concept, where it still uses these utility classes, but also component classes, because my personal opinion.
CSS.
Yeah, I know, but my personal opinion is you don't have to go full util. You have to use a purger, and that's an extra step for a developer. So it's not for everyone to use a purger. Maybe they just want clean, minimal CSS built with just the SCSS compiler. That's a choice. So that's why I asked how easy is it to replace it? Still using Tailwind, but migrating slowly with your own CSS. Maybe to clarify the question.
Yeah, so adding your own CSS as a layer on top of it. Yeah, but go ahead, add an extra style sheet and add the flavor that you want. Most of the elements on the page still have identifiers and classes, so you can address them from your own style sheets. So really, you should consider this a starter team. And I expect most of the agencies that work with it, that they will develop their own code base, maybe contribute a bit back to it, to the product, if they want to become a partner of Hyvä Themes. But I really think as soon as you build one team, you're going to be hooked and you're going to want to build a lot more, because it goes faster and faster and faster to build a team. I've seen development time accelerate very fastly at IntegerNet. So that's all quite exciting.
Yeah, so I think, Willem, in short, you've convinced a lot of people that at least things could be done in a totally different way. And I think that's one of the main golden takeaways for Reacticon as well, that we should think independently and just consider what the hell we're doing with front-end technology, and just consider alternatives. Even if it's React, even if it's Vue, some guy maybe also choosing Angular, but maybe Tailwind is or Hyvä is actually a nice little alternative that reminds more of the Magento 1 method instead of just going blindlessly in PWA.
Yeah, it's kind of gives a nostalgic feeling. I didn't have this much fun building templates since Magento 1. And you just feel empowered to build stuff, and just stuff flows out of your fingers, and you're just smashing your keyboard, and after an hour you have something done. And you can't say that about Luma. After an hour, you finally debugged where this information should come from or why it's not loading. And pretty much the same goes for PWA in my experience.
Yeah.
Again, I have nothing about these JavaScript libraries. I think they're great. I love the React checkout that we built. So I see the appealing parts of those technologies, and I think we can leverage that by building components and putting it in here, and there can be an overlap, and there will be agencies that do both. But now we enable an agency to do everything with Magento. They can opt in for PWA if they have a client that has the need for that and has the budget for that. And you can build a Hyvä Theme for the customer that is on a lower budget and wants to have it developed quickly. So this basically means that there's an alternative for mid-market, and an agency doesn't need to switch to other e-commerce systems to still serve the mid-market.
And that's,
so you can
I
keep
think,
your knowledge about backend and everything that you learned in the last 10 years about Magento.
So that's I think like the bottom line. So Willem, shut up and take our money, because this is awesome. Thank you so much. I think this was worth the wait. For many of us, hopefully, it was worth for me to continue the talk for yet another large half an hour. But I would like to wrap things up. We had 3 days of Reacticon. We had indeed very interesting talks about Vue, about React. We dived into Angular, we dived into Laravel, and now we dived into Hyvä as well. And hopefully, in the next couple of months, all of these thoughts will become something for the Magento community, because basically we have to imagine what else is going to be there, and not just only go for PWA. So imagine basically what we can do with the front end. Imagine. So maybe we rename Reacticon towards Imagine or something. That sounds like a nice little event name.
Anticon.
Or Anticon, or Vueticon, or I don't know, Angicon or something, something like that. But I think there's enough ground also to continue the discussion. There's enough ground to actually learn more about the different technologies and just get going with things. And to end Reacticon, actually, I would like to thank all of the different speakers. In total, we had a lineup of 21 speakers over 3 different days. And I think thanks to the fact also that it's an online event, this was possible. But also thanks to sponsors just jumping in to help us out. I'm going to thank everybody later online through social media, so that's coming up soon. Last but not least, this is Reacticon number 3. I was intending to organize this in a zoo somewhere in the Netherlands, so that's where all of the animals came from. Reacticon 4 is now planned in June 2021, so next year. Again in the same location, the zoo. But guess what? The expectations for COVID are a little bit differently. So we'll see where it ends up to be. But I think there's going to be a Reacticon 4 definitely, either in the Netherlands or either simply just online. And I simply hope that the diversity that we've seen throughout these days, not sticking with a certain solution, but just opening up our minds with different solutions, is going to set the mode for Reacticon 4 as well. So thank you. So long. Thanks for all the fish. And I hope to see you in the near future. Cheers.
Cheers. It was a great event.
Thank you.
Thanks.